Previously, we commenced a strike and attacked the Temple of the Navigator. This is where we encountered Alakul the Lightblade. We managed to slay the knight, but its ghost escaped from our grasp. Still, we were not left empty-handed, and acquired a Tablet of Ruin. Using the Altar of Reflection, we gazed into its psychic imprint and learned more about Savathun's intentions. She wishes to seal the traveler away in her throne world whilst wielding the light. We begin the 6th mission, the Cunning, after making our way into the cave system of the Quagmire. The HUD spoils our objective, so I'm going to pretend that I didn't read it. Fynch contacts us. He's feeling good about the lead he has, and believes that it could crack open this case. Ikora is not convinced by these words, but I am. So far, every single one of Fynch's leads has progressed our case. This one is probably no different. There's also the whole meta context of us already being in the 6th mission, but I'm not going to get into that rabbit hole. In response to Ikora, Fynch details his clue. Deep underground, there's another temple. But unlike the previous two, this one is much more of a secret. With a smirk, he then asks us if we can figure out who it's dedicated to. Since the first temple was dedicated to Xivu Arath, and the second temple was dedicated to Oryx, it's not that difficult to figure out who the third temple was most likely in worship of. Ikora figures this out as well, but we're only technically correct. It's actually dedicated to Sathona, the being Savathun was before becoming a Hive God. This is actually an interesting detail. Besides now also wishing to now know the names of Xivu and Oryx before they became Hive Gods, I'm also interested in the lives they led before becoming Hive Gods in the first place. Back in the first mission, we learned that Savathun only became a god due to her worm sending her and her siblings to the deep. This is where they became the Hive, but I still don't know anything about how they existed before this transformation. They weren't Hive quite yet, so they could have behaved in a completely different manner than what we are presented with now. I also don't know how much of that original species turned into the Hive, or if any of them exist outside of the 3 Hive Gods. Those are just general questions that would be nice to have answers for in order to flesh out more my understanding of this world. We discovered Sagira in Xivu's temple, and a tablet in Oryx's temple. So the real mystery we're focused on right now is what is being kept secret in Sathona's temple. Just based on what I know, which is not a lot, it seems like Sagira being kept in Sathona's temple would have made more sense than finding her in Xivu's temple. But I'm not privy as to how much Xivu played a role in taking over Osiris, so perhaps this does make sense. If I knew anything about Oryx, I might have been able to guess that we would have found a tablet in his temple, but I don't really have too much information of Savathun and or any special artifacts related to her. So if I had to take a guess at what we might discover, I would probably go with the only thing of importance we know she has. Oh, and I guess technically her ghost, but her ghost is going to be with her and not in a temple. Unless maybe not, I don't know. I do know since I read the script, but you probably know. Yeah, we find ourselves at the entrance of the Temple of the Wrathful and clear through some enemies before taking a portal forward. This is the start of our first encounter. The Scorn have expanded their presence from the last time we encountered them. This requires us to kill a bunch of adds. This section is fairly open, so I'm able to just float over most of the enemies as I take them out. I will say though, that if your melee does not kill a trash mob with sunbracers on, its usefulness drops down to literally not the melee, sunbracers. I realize that my sentence does not make that clear. Should I go fix it? Well, I'm already recording the voiceover, so this is a little bit of an issue, as sometimes the damage over time from the solar nades can kill the ad you are targeting. If your melee doesn't secure that kill, and you use your nades, you're left without any abilities. This is exactly what happened to me as I found myself trapped inside this pillar room. The lightning from the invasive abomination is also not something to scoff at, as it locks on and targets me down. This resulted in my first death in this area. I decided not to get zapped by the abomination the second time around, since I knew about it, and took care of it from afar with my nades. Ikora questions how Fynch realized that this temple belongs to Sathona. I don't think that this really makes sense for Ikora to be asking right now. Fynch literally asked us who this temple could have belonged to, and Ikora answered Savathun. She most likely got this answer through the same chain of logic I applied. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been so confident in her answer. That does imply that my chain of logic in getting to the answer was like the best, since I was like, oh, it's not. One minute, this episode is going off the rails, holy. Fynch's answer is terrible, but it at least is in character for him. He only managed to get a peek inside and saw a statue of Savathun. Sorry, a statue that just looks like Savathun. I guess whoever was in charge of carving that statue got lazy and didn't finish. To be fair to them though, most of the Hive look fairly similar. Although, to be fair to the Hive, to them, most humans probably look similar. Ikora asks another dumb question. She wonders why Savathun built a mausoleum for her younger self and then abandoned it. Why? Really? Why? Really, Ikora? Savathun built an entire... I'm saying about Ikora asking being so dumb here, okay? And it's all because the writers have to give all the characters something to say. And unfortunately, Ikora is the one given these really unnecessary lines that don't really make sense coming from her. They should have gone to our ghost, but I guess Ikora needed to say something. Savathun built an entire fortress on the surface of her throne world. Abandoning an old temple to her younger self that's hidden deep underground is kind of a natural side effect. I suppose, though, Ikora is confused as to why Savathun would build a temple to her younger self to begin with that's deep underground. We learned during Shadowkeep that the Hive prefer being underground to begin with, so perhaps it being deeper down is actually a sign that it is more significant. It being this far down and relatively hidden could mean that only the most trusted of Savathuns are allowed access to such a prestigious location. As to why the temple exists, it would probably be the same reason as to why the other two temples of the Hive gods exist, just to act as general areas of worship. Although I don't know if the Hive really do that. I'm just assuming. Because I know the whole sword logic things, I don't know if they pray like normally, just focus on sword logic. In any case, we eventually find ourselves on the grounds of the Temple of the Cunning. The room is an immediate dead end, but we're able to pick up some deep sight, which allows us to uncover a bunch of hidden Hive symbols. Ikora's questions finally make some more sense as she's trying to figure out why the Lucent Hive haven't come to confront the Scorn. This one question actually makes me realize that in the previous mission, when we were asked why the Scorn were here, I assumed that they were associated with Savathun. However, now I realize that the Scorn are actually a force opposed to Savathun and not one being controlled by her. This makes Savathun not responding to the Scorn an oddity to Ikora. But with the information we just learned, I do think that sealing away the Traveler is probably just a little bit more important of an objective to Savathun in this moment. Although I suppose she could send one of her lackeys to deal with the Scorn here. Fynch thinks that Savathun might be holding onto the Scorn in order to convert them into an additional force, but Ikora shuts down that line of thought. Instead, she thinks that the Scorn are actually aligned with the Witness. Their appearance is in order to combat Savathun, since she decided not to join forces with them. I know that Ikora first thought Fikral brought the Scorn with him here, and while Fynch rejected this theory, they have to be here somehow. So perhaps Fikral aligned himself with the Witness instead, and that's how he was able to get into the throne world. The final bit of Ikora's line mentions how you don't cede ground unless you're losing. Well, that's a terribly ignorant statement that falls apart as soon as you apply any sort of thought to it. We continue our descent and pick up some more deep sight in order to shoot some more Hive symbols. You have to shoot all the symbols before your deep sight runs out, and some of them have had their location hidden away. Conceptually, us having to find some hidden Hive symbols and shoot them is not that bad, but it really should be placed in an area with some work done on it. Like, there are some areas that are quite visually pleasing, and utilizing this mechanic in those places would force the player to slow down and look at the environment a little bit more. Shooting the final symbol clears our deep sight and removes the wall. This takes us to a small arena. This area has also been contaminated by the Scorn. I have no idea how they managed to get down here without deep sight, but I suppose this is one of those things I shouldn't think too hard about. After clearing these mobs, we walk towards the edge of the middle plank and bear witness to Savathun's temple. Hive membranes have completely overtaken the location and is what provides us the required visible light. The vibrant orange hue is also quite reminiscent of lava and adds to the sense of danger in depth of the scene. I drop down onto the main bridge in hopes of finding some diamonds. Instead, all I find are some scorn. After taking care of them, I walk up to the bridge, but there is no apparent way for us to drop it from this. Instead, we end up finding some deep sight and have to shoot some hive marks. I always make it a point to mention how we just pick up deep sight off the ground, because I really dislike how this is handled. Technically, I think we're supposed to just have deep sight all the time, but the buff isn't always on us because it would just be a waste of a slot when we don't need it. This only matters because we have 4 buff and or debuff slots. Sorry, we are only shown 4 buff and or debuff slots. While I do wish they would change how we obtained the buff, that would require much more effort on their end, and it might not even be any better. Instead, if we got a little bit more of an explanation on why we can acquire deep sight in these specific locations, then that would probably solve most of my major gripes. Some more scorn to pop in and distract us for a bit. I make my way forward by jumping onto some deep sight rocks, but of course, one of these rocks has a weird collision model. Thus, when I try to jump off this jagged edge, I have negative momentum and end up falling to my death. The frequency of these incidents is far too common for my liking. Fynch breaks the silence and, to lighten up the mood, wants to place bets on what we might find inside the temple. Unfortunately, both our ghost and Ikora hate fun, and cut the conversation short. After making a few more jumps, we make it to the other side. Our ghost spots a plate and is able to figure out that it should just lower the next drawbridge. We can stand on it and just have to capture the location. Since we can revive, this isn't what I would call a difficult challenge, but having to stand in one small area while screams rush at you does make this fight more engaging if you are trying not to die, at the very least. This does indeed manage to drop the drawbridge. Ikora is pleased and mentions how we should be extra vigilant for the statue Fynch saw previously. I didn't realize it, or didn't think about it, but Fynch got much deeper into the temple than what I was led to believe. I thought he just got to where we jumped off from, but this temple is also much grander than what I was expecting. Compared to her siblings, Savathun went much harder on her own temple, which actually makes complete sense. At the end of the drawbridge, we enter a connector room and am ambushed by 2 abominations. I kill them both, but due to my close proximity to the right side A-bomb, using my rocket launcher at low HP also killed me. I knew this could have happened, but when revives are free, I don't really care. We cross a smaller segmented bridge with some sort of green hive aura emanating from it. Ikora calls in, wondering if we found the object yet. But the only thing we see is a singular statue of Savathun in the middle of a platform. We also still don't know what the object is, so technically, we could have found it at some point, but completely missed it. However, that is going past the boundaries of the game. The statue is holding a blue crystal bow, so perhaps this is the object we need. Regardless, us finding nothing but Savathun's statue here is a little sus, and the appearance of the campaign banner lets me know that it's about to go down. Our goal now becomes to defeat Termix, Invasive Warrant, the warden of this area. I take a few shots at it before dropping my Well of Radiance in the middle of the room, but still behind a pillar in order to play around cover. I'm not that bad. Okay, maybe, but the warden's movements are incredibly erratic, and so I switch my weapon a couple of times as I try to hit it. A couple of chieftains link up with a generator and give the warden a temporary shield of invulnerability, while I'm still coming out of cover. Upon seeing that the warden is now immune, I immediately try to figure out how the shield was chained and who I needed to take care of first. I try to shoot the shield pack but miss. I try to correct my aim after that, but I don't even get the chance to move my mouse as I ADS. The chieftains and raiders bursted me down from max health to death in just 46 frames. My second attempt starts off the exact same way, but instead of just hovering around the middle of the map, I made my way into the back corner. This funneled the scorn towards me in a more manageable manner. I was able to unload my Apex Predator into the warden. A scorn shield connects to it though. I do a little schmooving and take out the shield generator ASAP. I don't even bother with the smaller chieftains and just take out the warden in order to end the encounter. Our ghost forgot his glasses and tells Ikora that there was nothing here. Ikora is upset and pushes Fynch, wondering if we did all of this work for nothing. This response seems a little short-sighted for Ikora. Being able to acquire evidence is good, but knowing that there was nothing here is still valuable information, so we aren't completely empty-handed. Fynch insists that there should be something of value here and supposes that the statue, or at least a part of it, is what we were looking for. Ikora realizes that we are still in Savathun's temple after all, so we can't eliminate the fact that some trickery might be in play. I managed to pick up some deep sight and look up. This reveals a rather large and elongated bell. However, what I was actually supposed to be looking for were some scattered Hive symbols. We destroy them to reveal another platform where we can pick up some deep sight again. This reveals even more Hive symbols, but this time they're all aligned vertically in a row. Destroying these removes the shield around the statue. The blue crystal is actually not a crystal, and instead a worm familiar. I assume that this is Savathun's worm, but it's not confirmed, which would make my earlier guess correct. But it could be like Oryx's worm, or Xivu Arath's worm, or maybe it's just a random worm. I did find it a little odd though that this worm, when we picked it up, was a weird glowing blue instead of looking like the worm we just saw in the icon. After that, I tried to jump to another platform, but my screen flashes white as a bubble of darkness traps us. I move my mouse towards the front of the room where a harsh growl is shouted out from. Somehow, there's now an Ahamkara in the room with us, and from my mouse, shaking, you can see the surprise in my initial reaction. Ikora notes that the last one died after cursing the Dreaming City, which confirms that Riven was the last living Ahamkara, or at least the last one the Vanguard knows about. Ikora assumes that this one is an illusion because of that information, and the boss text reinforces this theory. I chose to believe Ikora because, so far, this game has not ever tried to trick me through the UI. So this almost certainly was just straight up an Ahamkara illusion, like presented. I wish the UI didn't confirm this and just said Ahamkara with a question. I tried to shoot the Ahamkara's mouth as it violently ejaculated an immense amount of white space magic all over it, but only discovered that it was immune. I then tried to shoot one of the Ahamkara's toes, but that was also immune. The immune interactions, along with the fact that this was an illusion, made me think that there was some sort of mechanic that I needed to engage in. Thus, the obvious solution to me was to run directly towards the mouth of the Ahamkara. Yeah. I decided to expedite this process on my next attempt. As the encounter starts, I run to where the head of the Ahamkara normally appears. Some darkness has pulled up below its maw, but I only ended up running to a wall where I died. I know it looks like I'm hard hitting, but the giant head is kind of an obvious target, so it didn't exactly hurt me to check. Well, I died, but I can just respawn. Regardless, the darkness pool below the head, along with the wall just blocking me, made me realize that getting close to the Ahamkara was probably not the move. As I was walking back, I noticed a glowing green light and thought that it might have been some sort of Hive symbol. But after zooming in, I realized that it was just a lantern. Just a lantern. After that revelation, I had no idea what to do. The statue of Savathun still had some Hive magic surrounding it, so I thought shooting it would do something, but that also went nowhere. I started shooting everything at this point because I wasn't sure what I was missing. I went ahead and just killed myself in order to reset the encounter and to clear my mental. I positioned myself behind a pillar and just started shooting the mouth of the Ahamkara over and over again. Surely I was just missing something, and it had to do with the head, obviously. Eventually, some of my shots managed to connect at the end of the white magic burst. It sure took a while, but I finally made some progress. The damage window opened either at the end or beginning of the burst, so I was damaging the Ahamkara either while its attack was charging up or while it was recovering. Using a bow here kind of messed with the timing because I had to account for the draw time of the string and the release time of the arrow projectile. However, even though I wasn't sure of the exact window, I still discovered how to deal damage to the Ahamkara while avoiding most of the white blistering soul fire. I sat behind this pillar for an entire minute before our ghost finally chimed in to confirm that this is indeed an illusion. Very cool. Wow. I finally entered the second phase and the giant Ahamkara head retreats while some scorn take its place. After clearing the ads, we can re-engage with the Ahamkara. This is where I employed the same 3000 IQ strat from earlier. Truly, only a genius could have thought of this. Ikora lets us know that the Hive magic powering this illusion is limited, and that if we escape, it likely can't follow us. The way out is blocked, but our ghost reasons that the Scorn have to come in from somewhere. That's a great question, but most enemies just spawn in from somewhere, and that somewhere is unknown to us as the player. I got pretty lazy during this fight and allowed a raider to kill me with just a single punch, because I was just shooting the Ahamkara head. The next attempt was pretty much the same song and dance, but for some reason I decided to jump straight into the approaching Screeb, even though I just walked away from them. What am I doing? While avoiding the second phase Screebs, I ended up backing up to the point where I found myself on the platform of this back tower. I didn't realize it, but as the encounter continued, this ended up being a straight up cheese spot. You can avoid all the Screebs on the ground and most of the Ahamkara's attack. In fact, depending on how far back you are on this platform, you can actually move out of the Ahamkara's detection range entirely. This second part doesn't really help though, because you need the Ahamkara to attack in order to do damage to it, but it was an interesting find. I stayed up here because, funnily enough, the Screeb were the actual real threat to me, and those no longer spawned in. That statement may seem contradictory, but there is no functional difference if I shoot the illusion while behind a pillar on the ground versus being a little bit higher. Anyway, 1 minute later, I reach the final phase of the illusion. The Ahamkara retreats, and in a final burst of desperation, commits Harakiri. With the Hive magic no longer able to fuel the illusion, it instead envelops the area in a suffocating haze, which surrounds the entire temple. We only have 2.5 minutes to escape. I find some deep sight, which reveals to us an illusory bridge. I run across it, or at least I tried to run across it. I'm not exactly sure if you can run across this bridge or if it's simply an illusion. There does appear to be something at the end of this, but maybe Savathun is just trying to trick us. I didn't actually care about falling through the bridge, but I was worried I would have to repeat the previous encounter. Not because it was difficult, but more so that while the encounter excelled in being a completely unexpected set piece, as an actual fight, it wasn't the most exciting. I guess trying to figure out the mechanic was fun, but you only needed to do that once. The amount of Screebs needed to be tripled at the minimum. That would make the encounter much more annoying, while forcing me to actually have to constantly be changing positions while the Ahamkara illusion was attacking. Sure, I could go back on top of the platform and avoid all damage, but choosing fights is even more boring and is kind of the exact opposite of what I even asked for. After spawning back in, I decided to follow the actual path forward. While some Scorn try to stop me, the game presents us some pikes, which means that this is more of a vehicle section. Should I have gotten on my Sparrow? Probably. But when life gives you lemons, you squeeze them into your eyes. That's so you don't have to watch me miserably fail at controlling this pike during this section. Yes, I really did just fall off and die. Oh, and don't worry, I did not learn from my mistake and made the exact same error again in a row, still on a pike. That's okay because the third time is a charm. However, they aren't the lucky variety because my pike hits a pebble and explodes. I don't fail to jump the next time around and can continue forward. I also decided to bend in the pike. Some Ravagers attack us, but they are irrelevant. There's a pool of deep sight off to the right side, but I think that's just there from earlier. In any case, due to the clock, I ignored most of the enemies and jumped past them. Well, most of them. Somehow, one of the chieftain's nades hits me directly in the air. This completely stops my momentum and I almost die. I'm able to heal up though and kill the next batch of enemies. Just kill the next batch of enemies, that's it. After that, I take a beam up and return to the entrance of the temple where we reestablish a connection with Ikora. Fynch makes sure that we got the object and picks fun at Ikora for suggesting that this otherwise would have been a huge waste of time. I appreciate the sass back from him here, even if Ghost and Ikora don't. Ikora does display some more concern for us. She obviously still harbors some ill feelings from when she allowed Oryx to go in. I appreciate this, but she's overcorrecting a little too hard in her sentiment. As the Guardian, we are kind of the perfect person to go in when all we have is shaky intel. I return all the way back to the Witch's Echo and try to access the Altar of Reflection. However, we are rejected from the portal this time around. This is kind of a major problem because the altar was the only way we were able to read deeper into the imprint in the first place. I returned back to Mars after this major inconvenience, and Ikora has moved locations. This confused me for a couple of seconds, but Zavala's voice draws my attention. He and Ikora are engaged in a heated argument. Zavala's angry and disappointed in Ikora because she didn't communicate with him properly when they are supposed to be a team. I have no idea what the relationship between Ikora and Zavala was prior to this season or expansion-wise. I'll just assume that Cade's death strengthened their bonds or strained it even further, one of those two. Regardless, Zavala and Ikora don't discuss anything in detail. I can understand Zavala being a little upset that Ikora hasn't kept him completely up to date, but this is a serious investigation that requires much more brainpower than Titans are able to provide. I want to say that this is like the most pointless squabble of all time, and even though I don't know too much about their past relationship, surely they would have had to have some sort of miscommunication talk at some point before this. But what do I know? Arrow sends out for Ikora though, and Zavala backs off completely. He dips but tells us to keep him posted, which implies that he doesn't expect Ikora to do so. But I mean, Ikora is kind of also off the case, question mark? Eris then immediately informs us that a trusted source has found new evidence that could possibly be a memento from Savathun's last known location before her conversion to the light. Of course, it's deep within her fortress. Her telling this to me the second, not even second, like micro millisecond after Zavala leaves is pretty funny because I assume that he does not know about this. I do wonder if Ikora does though, and if she's already on the case. This is the end of Mission 6, the Cunning. Check out the previous episode where I covered the Lightblade Strike and my channel for more content.